friends, dear students, welcome to the 5th class of the module Political Science 2, Pol 102. Today we are going to talk about the parliamentary, presidential and hybrid systems as forms of democratic governances, and we'll be talking about propaganda. Parliamentary systems are rather typical in United Kingdom, in Italy and in Greece, for instance. They are typical examples. They are amongst the typical examples of parliamentary systems. And in some parliamentary regimes we also have the king. In some others we might have the president of the republic. But the point is, in a parliamentary regime, the prime minister plays a rather significant role as the chief executive or the leader of the government. In the parliamentary regimes, the legislative branch is elected by the people. So there is an election to determine the people who are going to rule the country in the legislative branch. But the political party having the majority of the votes, or the first political party in the elections, is appointed to establish the government and rule the state. So, in the parliamentary regimes, generally, the executive and the legislative branches are elected in the same elections. Additionally, in the parliamentary system, the government requires the vote of confidence from the parliament. So, at least more than one of the half of the parliament must be supporting the government in order to the government be established and remain in power. So, the half of the total seats plus one. That's the rule. For instance, if the parliament is composed of 100 people, 100 seats, so a government requires at least the support of 51 seats. So 51 members of the parliament. The rule is 1 plus the half. That makes the simple majority. And generally, the government and the parliament can dissolve each other. Both can ask for early elections in the parliamentary systems. Presidential systems are rather typical in United States of America and in Venezuela. In that one, something different from the parliamentary regimes. The chief executive is the president, and the president, as well as the members of the parliament, members of the legislative branch, are elected in two separate elections. They have a separate election for the president and a separate election for the members of the legislative branch. For instance, Mr. Trump, the current president of United States, was elected in a separate elections, not in the elections of the legislative branch. In such a case, the government does not require vote of confidence from the legislature. So, Mr. Trump undertook his duty as the new president of the United States, but he did not require a vote of confidence from Congress or Senate. And generally, in the presidential systems, the cabinet and the legislature cannot dissolve each other. That's a typical, a general feature of presidential systems. And additionally, we have the hybrid or the semi-presidential systems, such as in France and in Russia. In some democracies, dear friends, they function like a parliamentary system, but in some others, the president is given some veto rights for the governmental and legislative actions. So, in such cases, the president of the republic plays a critical role in the politics of that country. So, in such cases, we tend to generalize such countries as semi-presidential countries. For instance, just imagine in a country there is a president of the republic and the prime minister. The prime minister executes and parliament enacts. However, the president of the republic is elected or appointed for a fixed term. So there is a power sharing between the Prime Minister and the President of the Republic. For instance, France is a semi-presidential democracy, and talking about France might be helpful for us to understand what is the general logic of semi-presidential systems. In France, dear friends, actually in all the presidential and semi-presidential regimes, the president has different authorities. In France, the government deals with the budget, but the president enjoys large authorities in foreign policy and defense. In France, the parliament can dissolve the cabinet by taking back the vote of confidence, but the parliament cannot dismiss the president. And in France, the president of the republic might ask for early elections. That's his authority. And president and the prime minister, they share out the political power, but the president has significant authorities in France. That's why we call France a semi-presidential system. The second topic for us for today is the propaganda. Dear friends, no politician is free of political propaganda. And no politicized individual is free of propaganda. So, politicians and people who are interested in politics are not free of propaganda. Propaganda is made for someone or for something, or it is made against someone or against something. And actually, propaganda is the formula of managing the collective attitudes by manipulating significant symbols. That's what we call propaganda. Rhetoric and symbolism is an important feature of propaganda. Politicians use symbols to manipulate the public opinion. For instance, when he was elected as Greece's new prime minister, Mr. Alexis Tsipras visited the Greek communists. He visited Greek communists who were killed by Nazis. He went to the cemetery and visited the victims of Nazi invasion in Greece, and that was an anti-German symbol. Why Mr. Tsipras needed to use such a symbol? Because he was in negotiations with German Prime Minister Angela Merkel. So, anti-Nazi or anti-German, whatever you call it, Mr. Tsipras used a symbol, an anti-symbol there. And a person, a territory, or an object, all of them might be used as symbols, anti-symbols or pro-symbols. That's up to the politician. Dear friends, let's come back to the difference between the president and the prime minister in France in a semi-presidential system. As I told you, in France, the government, so the prime minister, deals about the budget. Prime minister is authorized about the budget, but the president enjoys large authorities in defense and in foreign policy. So you see, the executive branch is divided between the two leaders. So if the authority of the president of the republic is rather symbolic, then the regime might be considered, it might be called a parliamentary regime. But in France, the president of the republic has significant authorities that can shape the politics of the country. So this is an important distinction between the presidential and the semi-presidential regimes, as well as between the parliamentary and semi-presidential regimes. Dear friends, that's it for today's class. I'll be glad to meet you next week. Have a nice day. Thank you.